Everyone, this is live stream 21, and we have two topics tonight. First one's going to be firearms self-defense liability insurance and whether you should have it. We got a special guest on tonight from Right to Bear Insurance, so kind of subject matter expert on the whole topic, and we'll hear his opinions on the matter as well, and we'll also kick around what our thoughts are on it. Topic 2 tonight is just current situation that's going on in Ukraine. We've already had a live stream over that, and we figured we'd revisit it because it seems like things are escalating. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to go around the horn. I'm going to introduce everybody that's in the live stream tonight. So we got a decent-sized panel. But first and foremost, we got Les with Pegasus Test YouTube. Be sure to check him out. He's got his own tactical training company, and he's also a black hat instructor at the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. He was a Marine, served in the early 90s. He's always a wealth of knowledge, and like always, glad to have you on tonight, brother.
Good to be here, brother.
All right, next, my good buddy Chad Kata. Chad was a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. Served with him in Afghanistan in the 2010-2011 time frame. Good friend of mine. He's studying to get his doctorate in military history, and just always brings a great perspective to the chat. Thanks for coming on tonight, brother. All right, now the one and only Doc Larson, who is making his rounds. He's become a live stream whore. He's been cheating on our live stream channel that we've had recently. We've caught him in bed with many other YouTubers lately. So you might have to explain yourself later. But anyways, Doc is a wealth of knowledge. He started the One Shepherd Leadership Institute 40 years ago. He's a U.S. Army veteran. He served in Korea. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. He's an accomplished author. He's written many books on small unit tactics. And like always, Doc, we're glad to have you on the live stream tonight, bud. All right. And our special guest tonight, we have Perry. Perry's with Right to Bear Insurance. And if I'm not mistaken, that is a sister company of Palmetto State Armory.
That's
right.
So
it's his first time on the stream tonight. He's kind of our subject matter expert on this topic, the first topic that is. So, man, welcome to the channel. And, so that is our panel, guys. And, again, our first topic tonight is going to be over firearms self-defense liability insurance. Should you have it? What is it? And the reason we're going with this topic is because we've seen several high-profile cases lately. You got the Rittenhouse deal. You got some other cases that have happened. Some were found, not. Some were found guilty. And, there's no question if you get involved, if you are a responsible citizen, you carry a concealed weapon or open carry for that matter, and you get in a use of force situation, there's probably going to be some sort of legal something to follow, whether that's criminal or civil, something's probably come down the pipe. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to open up the floor, and who wants it?
I'll just shut my mic off so that Les can have it.
Under the grenade. Well,
yeah, I'm here to answer any questions. So, I don't want to sound like the insurance nerd, so I'll open it, like you said, open to questions, and I can share more about Right to Bear and then answer like you said, the questions that you might have.
Okay, well, that's a pretty good excuse to start with. I'm not sure the mileage you're going to get that with law enforcement, but, that's a worthwhile try.
Yeah, no, we, and I'll give you actually a quick background on me and how I come into this picture is in our tie-in with Palmetto State Armory. So I was actually the insurance agent for PSA. And when I came into the picture, I was talking with a guy I worked with one day, and he was like, wonder why they're not doing their own insurance. And, I didn't really even know that much about self-defense insurance and started doing some research. And next thing you know, we went in and we just like, hey, wonder why you guys aren't doing this yourself. And they called us back the next day, and, next thing we know, we're forming Right to Bear Insurance, which is the newest self-defense insurance player in the market. And we found that in our research, you talk about why people need it. Your home insurance does not cover any acts of self-defense. So, if somebody comes, believe it or not, comes on your property and you have to defend yourself, even in a justified shoot, you have no coverage. And even in a justified shoot, you're at least going to get sued, whether you win or not, right? And if everybody's doing everything the way they should, you're going to be fine. But it's still going to cost money for attorney fees. You look at the Rittenhouse case, you look at, like you said, all the other things that are coming up. Our friends in St. Louis, the McCloskeys, all that kind of stuff. It is needed, whether you carry or you don't, because you're leaving yourself with a giant void in coverage, especially if you're somebody of decent net worth and could potentially lose, have something to lose, right? The deeper your pockets, the more the lawyers are coming after you.
That's nothing to say, really.
I know, right?
That's a lot to consider there. And in today's litigious society, always having some form of insurance, especially the legal kind, is never a bad idea.
Okay, so then I'll play devil's advocate because let me say up front.
Because you live for it.
Yeah, that too. But come on. I have a home. I have home insurance. We have health insurance for every member of my family. I have travel insurance and all sorts of stuff that some of it I get from my work and some of it I pay extra for. So insurance is a fact of life, and it has proven it's one of those things you never want to use. You never want to use it, but you use it. Again, we have health insurance. We have all of these other car insurance, liability insurance. But you know what I don't have? I don't have freedom of speech insurance. I don't have a First Amendment insurance. I don't have walk down the street insurance. I don't have sex with my wife insurance, or sex with robots insurance. You knew I was going to go there. So what I'm trying to say is, let me go ahead and just be blunt about it. I resent the fact that we need insurance for a human right to life. That's what we're talking about here. When you say the right to self-defense, you're talking about the right to continue living because somebody else has put your life in peril or the lives of your loved ones. And I am deeply resentful that we need insurance for this. So I'd like to start there, even though I get it. You don't really have to. Maybe this is kind of a slow pitch to you, Perry, underhanded pitch so you can knock it out of the ballpark. But what do you say when people say that? Jesus Christ, you don't give me voting insurance. You don't give me right to speech or right to worship my faith insurance. Why in God's green earth do I need a right to life insurance?
Yeah, because nowadays, like, we said earlier, we live in a litigious world and you can be literally sued for anything. And this is an area that it's easy for the left to come in and sue somebody because all it is just a political grab. And I don't want to get in here and dive into politics, but there are 3 states that we run into issues with offering this type of coverage. Washington, go figure, New York, and New Jersey, right? I mean, kind of self-explanatory there. All it is, it's a form of gun control in a sense, not the insurance policy. Those states limiting coverage for gun owners because they want to try to sue you to make it seem that it's bad that you own a gun. It's bad that you had to use it. Should have never used it in the first place. And then now you have these other states that are trying to come in and say, oh, well, this policy actually helps people that own guns because it now gives you a peace of mind if you ever have to use a weapon in self-defense, right? So these people coming from the left, man, they're doing whatever they can to completely rip away, like you said, a human right, a God-given right. And in our Constitution, one of our, we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but it's sad. And it's sad that, there is even insurance like this out there. But the truth of the matter is that they are few and far between, but incidents happen. Actually, there's a stat on AmericanGunFacts.com I saw earlier. There's over 500,000 shots in America every year in a self-defense manner. Now, whether that goes into court or you're charged criminally or whatever the case might be. This stuff happens. And you look at the defund, and all this stuff is kind of why we started Right to Bear. You look at the defund the police movement. I know that's kind of drifting away, but nonetheless, it was there. Police response times are down. Crimes are up. Criminals are running the zoo in some of these bigger cities, right? And for them to just wheel and deal come in and just start shooting people, because let's be real, man, they have guns. The criminals have guns, right? The left doesn't want to admit that, but the criminals have guns. And it's not for, if it wasn't for the good guys that had guns, there'd be a lot more deaths than there already are, right? So we're now standing up for those people that are carrying responsibly. They're doing everything in a legal manner. They're carrying where they're supposed to be. And they're not out looking for, danger or an issue to dive into, right? So unfortunately, this is where we're at with this type of insurance, and so we need to we're here to protect our slogan is we're here to protect the responsible gun owner, and that's why we believe that you need it.
You bring up a couple good points there, Perry. One is that from the Jeffrey Kleck studies in the 1990s, and then I think they were repeated sometime in the 2010s, that went well beyond what the FBI, crime data reports can tell us each year. And to suggest that Americans defend themselves with firearms 1.5 million times a year. Now, Kleck was very careful about that, and in giving the clarifiers, the FBI has at least tacitly admitted, yeah, he's probably right, but also said there's no way that we can measure that unless every incident was reported, and they won't be reported because, as Kleck said, first off, much of that 1.5 million times includes animals, four-legged animals, dogs and snakes and bears, oh my. Yeah. But it also does include humans, in which, as he said, rarely in those 1.5 million times that involve humans, rarely is a firearm discharged. Just the mere presence of a firearm showing up sends all parties, good and bad, scattering. Yeah. And so this is one of those things where they say, and for that reason, it's just not reported. Again, the FBI has never officially said, yeah, we agree, but said, look, that's probably correct. Because FBI reports say it's something like 85,000 cases reported every single year of defense with a firearm. But again, that's only the reported, which makes up a small percentage. And I do appreciate what you're saying. Look, I saw someone say, hey, the Castle Doctrine. Yeah, well, that states with excellent Castle doctrines, and not every state has it, only protect you in your house. What happens when you're in your car? What happens when you're carrying concealed or out hunting and defend yourself against, there are cases of that. So what happens when you're well outside your home and you're defending yourself? You've got some potential liability there. I think, Perry, for me, the issue really is that this was couched for so many years as a progressive left anti-gun thing. This is what I heard for the last 20 years was every gun owner ought to have insurance. They should have all this punitive things that happen to them, and it should be financially, unavailable to most American citizens. And so it was couched as an anti-gun movement. And I do recognize in the last 5 years or so, I've seen it really come out from pro-gun movement, which is wonderful, by the way. That's us saying, hey, let us police ourselves. We don't need any government entity coming in here. We damn sure don't need progressive left Marxists to tell us how to own guns. And so in that sense, let me be clear. I do believe in firearm insurance. I've been honestly pondering it for the last 2 years myself. Because I'll go ahead and admit it, I'm a concealed carry, member. And so I've been contemplating that since I left Missouri, which had great Castle law doctrine. I live now in Virginia, which does not. And so, so now that's a real concern. And I appreciate that that's out there. I think you're right. We need to be responsible and hold each other accountable. But again, I'm resentful because for 20 years, this has been couched. Firearm insurance, firearm ownership insurance, self-defense insurance has been couched as an anti-gun theme. And I think it's it's really ironic now that the anti-gunners are going, oh my God, you guys were serious? No, don't get that. Don't get that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you guys are well aware what happened with the NRA's carry guard in the state of New York. I don't know if you are or if you're not. Okay, well, if you're not, I'd love to share it. So, speaking of how it could turn from a form of gun control, well, then it flipped to being like, oh, wait, they're actually backing the gun owners. So the state of New York came down hard on the NRA. The NRA had a policy called the NRA Carry Guard, and it was a self-defense insurance policy, very similar to what we offer, USCCA and some of those other folks out there. The state of New York crushed them because they had non-licensed agents selling this policy. And so basically then the New York Times got a hold of it, put out an article, said that the NRA was selling murder insurance, saying that you could kill somebody, be criminally charged, and get coverage for it, right? So then they ran off. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Ultimately, Chubb Insurance was the one that was underwriting the policy, backed by Lloyd's of London. Everybody got out of it, and then that whole program folded. I mean, they had to send out hundreds of thousands of cancellation letters and saying like, hey, we're done here. And all it started was that, the policy was being sold in all 50 states. And then the state of New York, spun it into a form of, the 2A movement and the conservatives are insuring people to kill others with their guns, when we all know that people kill people, guns don't kill people. And so they made it then. That's, I think, probably when it started to turn like, wait a second, like, the left media doesn't like this, so maybe it actually is a good thing, right? And that's kind of where that flip started to turn. And so one way that we've combated that is that our agency that we have, we're licensed in every state to write. We don't write in those 3 states, like I mentioned earlier. And then any kind of affiliates or any programs or CWP instructors that help promote our product, we don't pay them a commission like the NRA was paying. We pay them a flat marketing fee for the promotion of our product. Nothing, we're not doing like any kind of crazy residual income, stuff like that, just so we avoid ending up in the news as the next murder insurance company, right? So there are ways around it, and it's been pretty quiet over the last couple of years, and companies like USCCA have really started to emerge and start to grow a really big following. And there's 42 million. I think there's 42 million households in America that own a firearm, and there's roughly maybe 2 million people that currently have a policy like this. So there's room for everybody, right? We just saw an enormous opportunity for another player to come in and say, hey, we offer a great product. We are going to cover you criminally and civilly. Obviously, if you are involved in, charged criminally, we can't insure criminal acts, but civilly, we're going to pay not only for the legal fees, but we're going to pay for civil judgments, right? If heaven forbid you get some left judge who wants to do everything they can to ban guns, and you're in an incident and they sue you for it, and you got our policy, we're going to cover you up to the limit that you've selected, right? We're actually a real insurance backed by an insurance company. We're not a network of attorneys that gets together and analyzes, and who wants to take this case, and then they get appointed one. So it's a pretty unique program, and we tailored it that way because we wanted to indemnify, as us insurance guys like to talk about. We wanted to make somebody whole as if the incident had never happened.
So if I unfortunately have an incident with my concealed carry firearm, what am I covered for and not covered for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a handful of exclusions in our policy. I think a couple of the most notable ones that I'd like to share are in South Carolina at our state fairgrounds, right? You're not allowed to carry a gun on the property. If you were carrying a gun illegally and you ended up having to defend yourself right there and you used your gun, we wouldn't be able to provide coverage because you were illegally carrying your firearm, right? Stuff like that. That's an example of it. Here's the thing. If you're doing everything the right way, here's the point I'll make in a second. If you're doing everything the right way, you're carrying responsibly, you're not out walking around the streets looking for somebody to piss somebody off so you can come in and save the day. we're not in the business, and our insurance carrier partner is not in the business of denying claims. We've partnered with Prime Insurance out of Utah. They're an A-rated AM Best carrier. They've been in this space for years now. They just haven't had a sales funnel like us to kind of run with it. Us as in, our insurance agency is Moultrie Insurance, and we're partnered with Palmetto State Armory. So that's a hell of a sales funnel to kind of get started in. But yeah, you really have to be taken in. I was in SHOT Show this past week, and a lot of the guys I talked to, like, man, I do everything the right way. I don't need your stupid insurance, right? And I'm like, well, even in the event that, heaven forbid, you have to use it, there's still issues that can come down the pike. And people, being in insurance now for 6 years, people will sue you literally for anything.
Hey, somebody posted a comment in here. They're asking, would your insurance have covered like the Kyle Rittenhouse deal?
With Kyle Rittenhouse being under 18, I don't know if we would have covered him, to be honest. And then the other thing too, of him being out and about in that incident, and kind of being in a protest type situation, to be honest, I don't know if we would, so and I don't want to try to act like I'm trying to dodge the question here, but being the agent, I can't answer questions on like specific details of claims. And unfortunately, that's what the answer I've had to give on the Rittenhouse case, because he went out into a protest, right? But if the easier case for us is the McCloskeys, where people went onto his property, right? And he used his, and showed his firearm, him and his wife, right? That's where our policy is knocking that out of the park every day of the week.
I guess my question is like, I'm obviously inclined to believe that, hey, this is obviously an exceptionally good thing, because, I mean, it's going to be one of those things, like if something happens, like you're going to wish you had it, right? But at the same time, it's like, even though if you're a good American carrying your weapon every day, like you should, the chances of you getting in an incident are few and far between. But so it's not constantly poking at you like, hey, I need this, right? But my question is like, so with any insurance, there's always like little things, right? So recently I had to have my HVAC replaced, and my homeowner's insurance doesn't cover that at all. And so I was like out of pocket like $8,000. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, what am I paying for this freaking insurance for if it's not going to cover something like a damn HVAC? Like, you think that's a necessity, right? What are those little like loophole types things that like are going to come up? Obviously, you've already covered a couple of them, but that's my biggest question.
I mean, there are loopholes in all of it. I think the easiest example is the one that I gave, without me actually going through the exclusions. And I got my other monitor pulled up, and I'd love to actually poke some holes in it, because it's pretty interesting. I don't hide from what we look like we cover and don't cover, like how I answered the Rittenhouse case. I mean, I'd rather be honest and upfront so that you guys and everybody listening knows that I'm not just some sleazy used car insurance salesman trying to get everybody to buy a policy. And next thing you know, it doesn't cover. But talking about your home insurance, have been in insurance. The only way a home insurance policy would have covered you there is if there was an incident, like if somebody damaged your HVAC unit, or if it was damaged in a storm or in a fire or a flood or whatever, then coverage would have extended. But if it just broke because of X, Y, and Z reason, then it wouldn't have. I'm going to pull up.
Yeah, I don't know that. I'll kick that around, and we don't have to spend too much time there. I mean, the age thing I do get. Come on, Rittenhouse was below the age of, I think legal insurance, right? You have to be 18, I think, is what it is. But that said, I think what I hear you saying is, in name or in any other capacity, this insurance isn't suitable for people who put themselves in harm's way. I seriously doubt it's going to augment soldiers group life insurance or anything like that, right? Or any of the laws that surround being a military personnel.
Yeah.
being law enforcement or emergency services going into harm's way. But what I'm trying to say about that is that each one of them has their own unique insurance to that, because they recognize, wait, you're voluntarily putting yourself in harm's way. And so there is something about that with militia or community action group, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't bother me. Names don't, words like that don't bother me. My point here is, on one hand, I think, hold on now. I mean, I know militia members and state guard members who have responded to natural disasters, and that is that they have gone into areas of hurricane, flooding, tornadoes, right? And they've gone in to help people, and they went in armed. And I have to say that it would be wonderful if this did cover them. But I can also kind of appreciate why it doesn't. Those are such extenuating circumstances that are far beyond you walking around on your boat and getting pirated, literally pirated, right? Or carjacked while you're driving to work, or your house is broken into in the middle of the night. Those are different things that are thrust upon you. Likewise, if you're suffering, you're one of the victims of a hurricane, I think it probably would cover you then. But you're talking about Rittenhouse cases that he and a bunch of like-minded people very responsibly banded together. Again, militia by any other, a rose is a rose is a rose is a rose by any name. And so they banded together to go do public service in a county over that actually had crossed a state line. But nonetheless, they were saying, look, there's this wicked thing happening over there. We got to protect properties. We got to clean up the graffiti. They're burning things down. Let's go help people. If anybody needs first aid, we're going to render it. But they were willingly putting themselves. This wasn't his neighborhood. And he was willingly putting himself in there. Love to have insurance for those people because I think very highly of them. But I can see why this may not be that. This may not be that solution.
Yeah. I mean, going back to Brent's question, looking at some of the stuff like, one of the exclusions said that, an exclusion is the bodily injury arising from, rendering any professional service, right? So like, we're not going to offer civil defense to this specific policy is not going to cover a police officer while on duty, right? There are policies out there like that for them, right? But not this. This is a civilian self-defense. What was the term? The community action group. I think, like, for instance, our policy, there's the ability to add an endorsement that's coming here in a couple months to add for like volunteers in church. But like in that case, because you're providing a service as a volunteer security member of a church, right? There are specific policies and riders that you can add to cover that. But in a sense, even as a volunteer in a church, you're still taking that action step of putting yourself more of in a situation, right? But if you were in church and your church allowed firearms and somebody came in and then you use it, then we're good to go, right?
Good distinction. Excellent distinction there. Yeah. Good point.
So are there any restrictions on the type of weapon? Like it covers me if I get carjacked at the gas station, but like in the house, if I blow somebody away with a double barrel, any restrictions like that?
No, not. However you got to defend yourself, we're gonna cover it.
So Civil War canon, home defense, perfectly fine.
If you got it, I'm pretty sure we can make that work. We can get with the president of our insurance company to make sure that's covered.
Bruce, Chad, where you guys at? Jump in.
Well, I will say that attorneys are very expensive. Retainer fees usually are about $2,000, and an attorney will suck you dry at about $500 an hour. So,
right.
I think something like this, if you're not well off, can be beneficial.
That's right.
Perry mentioned that law enforcement officers have a similar program. I know in Texas they have TMPA, where if an officer is involved in an officer involved shooting, that $15 a month or $20 a month, whatever that officer contributes, will pay for all the legal fees and stuff like that. So even they have something like that. Basic policing 101, though, all unattended deaths are investigated as homicides until evidence indicates otherwise. So the basic mindset of investigators is that they're against the shooter, at least initially. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then you hear all these horror stories of perpetrators involved in civil suits, and they actually win. So I think something like this is a good thing.
Appreciate that, man. No, I agree. I want to read some things. I wasn't being rude. I was pulling something up to talk about part of our promotion of Right to Bear as we grow and continue to spread the word. There's no better point of, I don't want to call it point of sale because that, again, sounds just so slimy. Our best point of promotion is in a CWP class or a firearms training course, right? And I was meeting with one of our key CWP instructors at Palmetto State Armory here in South Carolina. And he has a slide in his PowerPoint of his class that talks about the fees associated with an event like this. And he had an attorney friend of his basically put together some prices of what he would charge his client if they were ever in an incident. He said his starting point for a criminal case would start at 65 grand. Or if it wasn't going to make him 65 grand, he wasn't going to take the case. For civil cases, 50,000. You're looking at an average bail of $50,000, and then your expert witness fee can be upwards of $3,000, and then any kind of other various court fees upwards of $5,000. So, for your normal stand in the road case, I mean, $50,000 unless you've got it sitting around. And I know the likelihood of it ever happening, but again, like we've all said, that's why you buy insurance, is that, shoot, I never want to need it until I need it, right? So I think that it provides a great security blanket. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it gives you a great peace of mind knowing like you only have a couple seconds to make a decision, but you go, okay, well, hell, I got Right to Bear behind me, as you hear that person kind of crack into your house and you load your pistol, right? I know that's a cheesy example, but I mean, that's the honest to God case of a typical where this would be a perfect scenario for Right to Bear to come in and defend one of our insureds. So I just saw a question come in real quick. I will touch on. So they asked, how much is your insurance? We have 4 different plans. We have one plan starting at $10 a month, and that gives you $50,000 of civil, criminal, and civil judgment coverage. Then our next tier goes up to our silver plan, which is $500,000 of coverage for civil, criminal, and civil judgments. Multi-state coverage is included in our plan. So if you live in Florida and you go over to Georgia, that's included. Psychological support, this expert witness coverage is included. You can add your spouse at a very discounted rate. For the silver plan, I think it's like $60 to add, $5 a month to add your spouse. So it's very inexpensive when you start talking about the grand scheme of things. I actually haven't done, now that I'm thinking about it, I wish I would have done, like if you paid $20 a month, I mean, I guess you could do it. Anybody good at quick math? $20 a month for 40 years, how much that would cost you? Does that, so is that, it's 230, I think our yearly plan is $235 a year. You do that for 40 years. How much is that?
Something like 10 grand. Yeah. It's right around.
Yeah. So you pay $10,000 in insurance for the one instance that might cost you 75 grand. Right. It's a gamble that once I really got to doing some digging, I was like, yeah, this is definitely something that people need, and they need to hear about it.
Yeah, I've followed quite a few cases recently, starting with the Rittenhouse case, but I'm kind of hooked on this internet crime that there's a group of attorneys that follow these cases. A lot of them are personal defense related, and they actually have an attorney that specializes in personal defense, and he's much the same way. I mean, your cost on these things is not way off. Chad said $500 an hour. That's a very accurate number for an attorney to do work. That includes just them replying to your emails and doing paperwork in the background, not doing any real work. And a good attorney that's really worth his salt, he is going to probably not take a case for less than $50,000. I don't know why he would. He's got a group of people that are reaching out to him, asking him to defend them. And if he can take those that are willing to pay the most and the cases that he feels that he can win. So it can be difficult, especially if you're in a questionable situation or if you don't have the funding. I know that the one guy that I follow, he says he turns down cases every single day because the person doesn't have the funding to go through with the case and allow him to do his very best work to get them off at the end, right? So I don't think you're, that is something to think about, is the overall cost. And I think that's a deterrent for everybody. If you were offering your services for free and they were good services, who wouldn't sign up? So it comes down to someone's got to figure out, they're kind of taking a gamble, I guess, of whether they're gonna go through life and never need it, or if they do need it, then it's kind of there to back them up. And I think that's a personal decision for everybody. It's something I've been looking at. I know a lot of people have said that. I actually had it for a couple of years through work with another organization before you guys were ever offering it. And I actually think, Perry, maybe some of your advertising's working, because I kind of remember seeing some of the promotions that PSA was running over the last few months, and there was like a banner up there to check out the insurance side of things. So that's pretty cool. But rather than ranting on, let me give you a question from the group. Maybe you are familiar with this, maybe you're not, but someone had asked, have you seen a situation where having insurance was used as an accusation against the defendant for premeditation? In other words, you had insurance, so you were looking to go out and shoot someone. Now, I know some people have said that also sometimes judges won't allow that to be entered into like a jury trial. And I've seen that happen too, but I'll let you comment on it if you know anything about it.
I actually don't. That's a great question. I can't imagine that being the case, though, with somebody having insurance. Say they've had it for 2 years. I will tell you this. It was a really interesting story I heard. Interesting, kind of messed up. Actually, definitely messed up. There was a lady that, this was maybe 3 years ago, she went into a sporting goods store, bought a gun, bought a USCCA policy, and then 10 days later went and killed her husband, right? Thinking that, she was in the clear. Obviously that no coverage there, right? That obviously that's not going to happen. But any of us on the call, and I would go ahead and bet that anybody here asking questions or commenting here on this little blog, you go and buy a policy. I don't see there being, I get the point you're trying to make. I don't see there being any premeditation to it. And through the trial process, they will clearly identify whether or not that there was premeditation behind it. No, that's a great question, though. I hadn't actually, in the now almost year we've been researching on it, I actually have not had that question asked.
I think one of the big things to consider is, even if you get cleared criminally, if you're in the clear, like let's take OJ, for instance, right? Case aside, he's found not guilty. He's found guilty on the civil side, right? And still ordered to, pay, restitution and stuff. So, that could happen to any one of us. And in my opinion, that would be one of the biggest reasons, not just the criminal aspect, but the civil aspect. All this shit that we've worked our whole life for, you end up having to forfeit everything to subsidize some thug,
Yeah, Brent, that brings me to a great point, and you kind of segued it into what we do. We're real insurance. We're not a group of attorneys, right? That's just going to cover legal fees, unfortunately. And I'm not here to bash and do that. There are a couple of competitors in this space that I'm thankful that they've been in the space. I'm thankful that they're there to back these gun owners. So I'm not here to do that. But as far as comparing us versus the rest of folks out there are people that they promote such a low price, but they only cover legal fees. There are no civil judgment coverage included in their plan, right? So I mean, you could end up having a case easy where, like we showed, $50,000 for legal fees, but you not accidentally, but here's the example I'll give. This is the real world example. My wife was at home about 2 weeks ago. Homeless guy's walking up and down the street, peeking in the house, peeking and trying to open our doors. He's going up and down the neighborhood, right, trying to get into people's houses. No idea what he's doing in there, right? What if our front door is open? He comes in. She is shooting that joker right between his eyeballs, right? Well, you better freaking believe that his aunt, uncle, brother, cousin, deceased grandfather is resurrected from the grave to come out and sue us, right? He wasn't mentally right. You didn't need to shoot him. He wasn't trying to come in and do anything wrong. Next thing you know, you end up with a bad judge, and now I'm having to pay $100,000 or 150 grand for mental anguish and funeral costs, and you ruined Johnny's birthday, and he was actually on his way out of the homeless shelter, right? I'm not trying to stereotype those people, but I'm saying that it could easily happen. And the fact that there are people that are not offering that coverage, I think, is a huge advantage for us at Right to Bear, and which is why we chose the route that we did, because I would rather not have somebody buy our policy because they think we're too expensive than come to offer and they have a product like you say, and we got your legal, fees, but they drop that civil judgment bill on your desk and say, "Oh, hey pal, you're on your own." That's not something that I want to specialize in.
Somebody asked the question, if you make mods to your gun, like you put a better trigger in your Glock, or you do some other type of modification, does that have any effect on the insurance?
No. Nope.
Here, I got one. This is a high profile case, obviously, and not judging this from the aspect of because we know the verdict now, but go rewind when it first happened. Think of like the McMichael scenario, right? Somebody sees somebody in a home under development or whatever. They start going after them in a citizen arrest, vigilante, however you want to paint it. Just given the facts initially, okay, would that have been something that would have been covered?
Y'all are going to make fun of me, but I actually don't know that much about that case. So could you give me a quick little breakdown?
Yeah. So again, I want to go back to like the beginning, what we knew in the beginning. Obviously, the trials already happened, and those subjects were found guilty for murder. But essentially what happened is a house across the street from where this gentleman lives. The guy's a former law enforcement. He's retired or not employed anymore, something along those lines. But he sees a gentleman go into the house under construction. He thinks this person is burglarizing this house under construction. He thinks that he's stealing stuff out of the house. So the person comes out of the house. They confront him. He takes off running. The gentleman and his son jump in a pickup. They go following after him in the pickup. And essentially what happens is they catch up to the guy. One of the guys gets out with a shotgun to detain the individual. And the individual that they chase down, ends up getting in a fight with the gentleman with the shotgun. The guy with the shotgun shoots him. And that's what on its face.
Yeah. I think you might have froze up.
Did I? Can you guys hear me?
I got you now.
I can hear you fine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just knowing that on its face, again, I don't want to go into the trial. Okay. But those were like the facts that we knew at the beginning when the situation first unfolded. Do you think that's something that would have been covered by not just your company, but, most firearms insurance in that aspect?
Yeah. I don't think so. Considering that, I thought if he would have walked into the house and went like just kind of looking around for see what he was doing, the guy actually was robbing and turned around and went to shoot him, right? And then the guy pulled out a gun and defended himself, then yeah, all day. But the fact they went and ran him, chased him down, and held him down, and that's not a self-defense incident. So I can't foresee anybody offering coverage for that individual. And then especially the fact that he was then, convicted of a criminal act, then yeah, you're kind of out of luck there. That's a good scenario though. That's a great question.
Well, we have the advantage of knowing that both of them were convicted of a criminal act, but then let's look at another one that chased down somebody. The gentleman in Texas who wakes up to gunfire, gets barefooted into his pickup truck with an AR-15, drives to the local church where he hears the gunfire, and a madman, this is in Texas, and a madman has just killed, 20 some odd, wounded another 20 some odd. He sees him, shoots him, wounds the gunman, the crazed killer gunman, wounds him. The gunman then jumps into his car, drives away, and the Good Samaritan chases him. Eventually, the car crashes, and the gunman turns the gun on himself. But my point here is, yeah, we have the benefit of I think that was in Georgia, or was it Alabama, Brent? What state was that in?
Well, the scenario you're just talking about, it happened in Texas.
Yeah, but the other one where the father and son were convicted of murder.
Georgia, I believe.
Georgia, yeah. So again, we have hindsight, and hindsight is easy, right? But in both of these cases, we have hindsight in both cases. In both of these cases, one turns out to be a good Samaritan and is championed as a hero, that he very likely saved lives, although a lot of damage had already been done before he even showed up. But nonetheless, they believe there was nothing stopping this gunman, and he very likely saved lives. The people who had survived and are trying to escape the church, and this guy's chasing them down when the Good Samaritan shoots him, wounds him, chases him down, pins him so that police can show up, and only then does the madman take his own life. Well, had we gone through a trial, in fact, there was an investigation for all of this. Of course, there was a legal investigation, and they come out and they say, what a great Samaritan. He's a hero. Let's put a medal on his chest. Where the father and son, they said, are you nuts? What's going on here? You chased down an unarmed man who you then subsequently killed. And by the way, we're not even sure that he was the guy who was repeatedly robbing this construction site. Now, that isn't to say that he wasn't the guy. They never really pan that out in the trial. They don't try to, they just say, are you sure this was a guy? No. Yet, nonetheless, your actions led to his death. And he was unarmed, and, and who's attacking whom here? So I guess the question is, one turns out great, one turns out bad. If a lot of people would say, look, if I'm doing the right thing with a firearm, if I do what I believe is the right thing, am I going to be covered in the insurance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have the answer right now.
Fair enough.
I don't. I actually, again, that's another one I haven't heard, is if you, in a way, kind of have a good Samaritan type of act where, you go to protect another individual, or individuals, and no, I don't know. What I do know is our policy is well more geared towards self-defense than an act of courage like that. I don't think that, to be honest, I don't think that's something that any of us in this space would cover. I think that would be nowadays it would be, get popular on the news, and they start a GoFundMe, and it funds all the legal bills that would go into that incident. But no, that doesn't sound like, I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then, and it makes some people mad that our policy doesn't cover it, then, I didn't write the policy, but.
No, well, and then my guess is, and again, I'm not an insurance expert or a legal expert. My guess is it varies from state to state. One incident I gave was in Texas. The other one is in Georgia. And, Missouri is a different state. Wisconsin is yet another state. And we are talking about examples from all of these as well as others. It probably does vary from state to state, not just on how the criminal laws are written, but how like Castle Doctrine. Someone wrote, hey, Chris, don't forget that the Castle Doctrine covers your car. I know that's true in Missouri. It doesn't just cover your home, it covers your vehicles. I'm told that's not true in every state. So now you've got all sorts of issues. Does it cover Good Samaritan? I mean, when I was concealed carrying in the state of Missouri, one of the things I was told was absolutely, by a lawyer, mind you, that was teaching the class, that absolutely Missouri law did allow me to be a Good Samaritan, meaning I didn't just have to defend myself and my family. If I saw a situation where my neighbors are being, violently attacked, can I, act on their behalf? And the answer is, in the state of Missouri, at least at that time, the answer was yes. You're covered as a Good Samaritan. There was a case, and I can't remember what state this was. It's the wildest story ever, where a neighbor has a deer, some kind of deer rifle. I say a deer rifle. It's a rifle with a scope. And he is in the dark. He is looking through the scope rifle, and he's just kind of testing it. Unloaded, of course. He's responsible. But what happens is he looks across the neighborhood, peers into, because it's dark, so the lights are lit. He peers into his neighbor's house and sees his neighbors, the husband and wife, tied up. And he's like, what in the world? Is this some crazy sex act? He's looking at this and he's watching, and he can see a guy going through all of this armed. And then the guy comes back into the room where the husband and wife are, walks towards them armed with, I don't remember if it's a knife or a gun or a club. It doesn't matter. He was armed. And the neighbor thought, oh, what the hell? He's going to kill him. He loaded the rifle, one round in there, took the shot, killed the bad guy. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine in that state. And he was heralded as a champion of human rights and self-defense. So I give this example because could you imagine that in New York City? So I'm sure the insurance is going to vary from one state to another, as all insurances do. Your motor vehicle insurance varies slightly from one state to another, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here, guys, because we're almost at an hour. And I'm just gonna say with the caveat, hey, anything that involves legal and lawyers, there's one word that sums it all up. It depends. Anything freaking lawyer related, it depends.
No, you're nailing it on the head. We're selling the funny thing, I didn't realize this. I played football in college, and when I got done, people were telling me, hey man, when you're done, you should sell insurance. And I'm like, sure, man, let's give it a shot. And I didn't realize that, I'm going in trying to set up these meetings, and people are saying like, man, I freaking hate insurance. I'm like, what? It's like, because you guys are in the business of denying us, man. And a lot of people have had issues with insurance in there. And, Brent, you just went through an incident yourself, right? And, it's hard because we're selling a promise, and then in a way we're funding a bunch, and like, no offense if anybody's a lawyer on the call, but we're funding through insurance a bunch of lawyers that really are just going to duke it out, try to get as much money as they can out of it. And then, oh no, then we'll settle. It's interesting deal.
Hey, we're almost at an hour, guys, so I want to wrap this topic one up. Perry, I'm just going to turn it over to you, man. Just for the audience, I've seen a couple questions come in here. I keep seeing the same question about modified guns, so please, like, solidify this, because is this a thing? Like, people keep asking about this.
Yeah, no, you're good on the modified guns.
All right. So, yeah, just give us information on your company, where people can find you if they're interested in your particular company's policies, and then we're going to segue into topic 2.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you having me on. protectwithbear.com is our website. A neat little caveat to our program and our plan is that we actually offer a discount at psa.com with the purchase of one of our policies. So if you purchase a gold policy per se, give you $1 million of coverage, you get $70 off at palmettostatearmory.com. So it's a great way to kind of promote what we're doing. Everything we're doing is the real deal. Obviously, we were backed by one of the giants in this industry. We're really excited and would love for you guys to compare our plans versus the rest of the competition. I think that we offer a great plan. We got some pretty cool coverage revisions that we're expecting to come out here in the next couple months to really enhance and enhance everything that all these responsible gun owners out there want and need, to heaven forbid, if they're in an incident, they can think like, okay, I'm good, and then make sure they're taking care of their family. So, our heart behind the mission kind of coincides with PSA, and that was to put affordable firearm in the hands of every American. And now we want to protect them as they, not a lot of first-time gun buyers. And so buying a policy like this gives a lot of people peace of mind. So that's my pitch. Appreciate you guys having me on, and this was a great discussion. If it ever comes up again, let me know. And if you guys ever have a segment talking college football, let me know too.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know you took some tough questions tonight, so appreciate you doing your best to answer. So
cool. Well, I appreciate it, guys. I'm gonna hop off and go finish my dinner.
Thanks
for being on, Barry.
All right, fellas. Well, that is going to be our segue into topic 2. So, situation in Ukraine is unfolding pretty drastically. We did have a live stream about this a couple weeks ago or several weeks ago, and at that time the Russians were initially massing on the border. I mean, they are really massing right now. So, let's go ahead and talk about this, guys. Let's pick this up, man, because lots transpired. I mean, you got the president saying, hey, we're not sending troops, but we're sending weapons. You got a bunch of neighboring countries sending weapons. You got some countries like Germany not doing jack shit. And then you got U.S. family members or U.S. diplomats being told to leave the country because of possible invasion. So that's kind of the situation right now on the ground in Ukraine. So I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll say this.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Your last real quick. I know last time we had a whole bunch of Russians here bumping their gums about how this was a whole bunch of nothing, and Russia wasn't doing anything but a military training exercise, and they weren't actually preparing to invade into Ukraine, and this was a big nothing burger. Now, I want to know where you guys are. So start posting over here in your little cryptic languages and start bumping your gums again, because I bet you're not here now. Okay, Les, I'll turn it over to you.
Damn, that's a hard segue to follow up. Yeah, things have definitely changed, and it's kind of hard to believe in a certain way there won't be an invasion, because if they're truly massed 100,000 troops, you don't normally do that just to go ahead and do that. I mean, Doc, you might be able to back me up here, but Reforger never even got that big.
Yeah, no, Reforger didn't. That's bigger than Reforger. Team Spirit did. It would get up to 250,000 at its heyday. Reforger would get up to about 100,000 in its heyday. And those two are ginormous. Those are the two largest war games in the world, in the history of the world, to my knowledge. And so when you're seeing this magnitude, realize we haven't seen this magnitude in 25 plus years of this magnitude of a war game, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you believe the news reports, a lot of those Russian troops have gone in through Belarus and preparing to come down from that. And if that point on the map, that's a dagger pointed right at Kiev. That's not just reinforcing what's been going on over in the Donbass. That's pointed right at Kiev. It's got NATO on edge for sure, depending on which country you are, whether it's a NATO country supporting the Ukrainians or not. You've got to be thinking, especially if you're Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, especially, that, oh crap, this could keep going.
Yeah, if I can jump in there and to kind of back Bruce on this, look, let me give a couple of caveats. We're all Americans on this board, and if you've paid attention, we can be very highly critical of America. In fact, we will continue to be, right? It's part of what we do here is we're a watchdog. That's part of our function. But we're very critical of America at times. That doesn't mean we hate America. So when we're critical of Germany, doesn't mean we hate Germany or Germans. And when we're critical of Russia, we don't hate the Russian people or Russia as a nation. I can say that as a military veteran and a combat veteran, I very much want a strong Russia. I do. I want a strong Russia. I do because, at least as a general rule of thumb, strong nations bring not just political stability and less violence, but also have a tendency to bring economic prosperity. Okay. If they don't always bring representative government, okay, that's true. But at least on safety and security and then economics, they tend to be stronger than those who are weak governments, right? So that said, I want a strong Russia. I do not dislike Russia. I think Russia has some legitimate grievances with the United States of America and legitimate grievances with NATO. However, to back what Bruce said, the insistence, Putin's insistence, what's all the hubbub? Gee, I don't understand why NATO is getting so, excited about just a standard war game. The largest war game we've ever seen in 25 years. And oh, by the way, Russia, did you not just invade Ukraine twice in recent years? I mean, if you hadn't had an invasion of, twice in recent years, maybe we wouldn't be getting nervous about this. You know what? What also adds to Putin's or detracts from his credibility is the fact that he has publicly stated in recent months the Ukraine people and the Russian people are one people, one language, one culture. Okay, where are you going with this, buddy? Because it's starting to sound like you're saying Ukraine's sovereignty isn't real. Well, to that I respond with this. The British, the Scottish, the Irish, the Canadians, the Americans, the New Zealanders, and the Aussies are one people. We have one language, essentially one culture, very similar governments, at least their representative governments and economies. We are nominally capitalists. And some of us even share common borders, yet we still maintain our sovereignty. And it works very well, thank you very much. So for Russia to be swooping in and saying there will not be a Ukrainian member of NATO, who is Russia to say that for the Ukrainians? Again, I'm not going to keep repeating this all night. I like Russia and I want a strong Russia, but not at the expense of its neighbor, Ukraine.
Hear, hear.
Well said, Doc.
You go, Chad. Chad, I know that head you got is just full of great Russian and Ukrainian knowledge. So spew some of it out.
Well, I do want to say that Ukraine is its own culture. They have their own language. They have their own history, et cetera, et cetera. There is Russian influence there, obviously, but they are their own people. I wrote some notes here, and a lot of it's focused on what can Ukraine do in the height of all this. So quick history. After the fall of communism, Eastern Bloc nations one by one started joining NATO. The Baltic states joined, Latvia, Estonia, they're all part of NATO now. You got Georgia tried to join. That was thrown out after the 2008 invasion. And I think there's some parallels between the 2008 invasion of Georgia and the proposed invasion of Ukraine as well. Essentially, Russia sees the intervention of NATO as a threat in its sphere of influence. And I think one of the strategic goals of Russia is to force Ukraine to act in ways that Georgia did as well. There was some atrocities, some terrorism, things like that. And NATO turned a blind eye to Georgia. Now that's kind of reestablished now, but for a long time, NATO shunned Georgia. And I think that's what's kind of brewing here is they're using the threat of invasion to, provoke Ukraine and piss off NATO by, because the only form of resistance they're going to have is guerrilla warfare, possibly hybrid warfare. They do have some tanks and some stuff like that, but not to the extent that Russia does. So there's probably going to be some hybrid warfare there. There's probably going to be some terrorism there. There's definitely going to be some guerrilla conflict there. And in the heart of all that, there's going to be some atrocities. But I think what Ukraine can do is, I want to go back to Sun Tzu, who said that no state ever benefited from protracted war. They have to extend this out for a long time. Russia has a history of not doing very well in protracted war. They didn't do well against the Finns in 1939 during the Winter War. They did later on. They did win, but after the Winter Offensive in December of 1939, Russia was shut down by Finland. Afghanistan, Chechnya. Chechnya is huge here. Chechnya, Putin rose to power because of Chechnya. So there are some parallels there as well. The conflict in Chechnya was reduced guerrilla warfare, terrorism on both sides. Russia eventually left, then came back for a second Chechen war Putin was in charge of. He had a tough policy with the Chechens, but the Russian strategy was to cut off Chechen borders. Now, if you look at where, let me share my screen here real quick. This is a picture. The source of this is Conservative Daily News. I don't know how accurate this is, but you can see that this is, probably fairly accurate about where Russian troops are staged right now. It looks like they're repeating the Chechen strategy. Cut off Chechen borders, control open areas, tactically using overwhelming firepower on suspected enemy strongholds, then mop up with troops. They're definitely targeting Ukrainian borders here. Like was mentioned earlier, they're in Belarus right now. And like Les said, that's a direct link to Kiev. So I think what they can do, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Central Asia. I mean, there's farmlands. If you look at satellite photos of Ukraine, which I've done all day today, just looking at the terrain, it's all farmland. It's all flat, open, rural farmland. There are really no mountainous regions or anything like that except in the west. That's going to be hard to control, a lot of that. It's going to be a guerrilla's paradise out there. The weather in Ukraine right now is cold. Is Russia prepared to fight a winter offensive? Who knows? Ukraine's going to have to probably use, like I said earlier, hybrid warfare style, conventional and unconventional means. Don't look for decisive battles. Harass the enemy when possible. Deception will be important. I think the Russian influence in Donbass is heaviest, and I think that they may end up controlling that region at the end of this, even if the Russians don't win. So that's my spiel on it. I do want to say that tying into what Doc was talking about earlier, I want a strong Russia too, but for a very different reason. I think a Cold War would do a lot to serve this country well. And I grew up during the Cold War. I remember that we had a lot of unity during the Cold War. There were really no differences between the political parties during the Cold War. Even guys like JFK, Lyndon B. Johnson, they were staunch anti-communists. And the Democrat Party was not nearly as left as it is today. So I want a strong Russia. I want a strong China, but for a very, very different reason. So I'll end with that.
Yeah, and Chad's right. The best pro-American action movies came out during the Cold War. We wouldn't have any of the Rambos if it wasn't for the Big Russian Bear, or Red Dawn, the first one, not the shitty second one. Think about this, though. I tell you that, Chad, I agree with everything you said. Your map looked just like the map I had looked at. And I see some guys saying that Russians are planning to cross the Dnieper and they're not going to go to Kyiv. Okay, that may be. But I think that we as a country are setting them up to go into Kyiv. Because all I've heard on the news over the last, probably 2 weeks, and it doesn't matter what channel I'm listening to, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, it doesn't matter. They are saying that the Russians are going to be pushing into Kyiv. They've already set us up as Americans, those that aren't necessarily in the know militaristically, which is 95% of the country. They've already set them up to accept the Russians going into Kyiv. What's the purpose of that? Why would they be spreading that information if they weren't setting it up for that setting us up as a country to accept that type of defeat, or that type of defeat from the Ukrainians, or that type of invasion from the Russians? So sometimes you've got to kind of look at, like, what is the mainstream media saying out here, and why are they saying it? What is Yahoo News saying? What are they giving to the masses, and why are they putting that information out there if it's not true? I just think that a lot of what's been set up, we can say the same thing with the president and what he was saying about small incursions versus large invasions. He's laying the groundwork for us to accept some type of action from Russia that we would deem as a country acceptable. And I think that that's a point that has to be well taken. It's something we just need to all consider.
I mean, just a quick comment to that, Bruce. I mean, come on. Putin has the same issue going on as Biden. They're two right now. Putin has been a very strong president. Right now, his popularity is waning. Biden is a empty suit, and so bad presidents need war. That's why we had the Falkland Islands War, right? Because when you know that bad presidents want to rally everybody around them against those bad guys. So I've been listening with a filter for weeks now, and I have the same concerns that you're airing here, Bruce. And that is that I'm like, are we pumping this up? Especially when I heard Germany saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" But then as other NATO allies started saying, "Guys, no, this looks like a third invasion of Ukraine." Third invasion of Ukraine. Wow. Yeah, it starts to look like a very real threat. And of course, that pays dividends to the Biden administration, who's seen as incompetent, who's, suffering from one, setback after another in elections and in Congress. And of course, the highest inflation rate that we've seen since the early 1990s in the wake of the fuel shortage of the 1970s. I mean, it's really not a good economic situation back here or political situation back here for Biden. So this is a happy distraction for that administration. All that said, when other allies started to take this seriously, I think that's when I sat up personally and said, whoa, we got a problem here. We've got a problem. And then again, Putin's own words have been strong indicators that he doesn't see, that he wants to, I believe the term is revanchism. He wants to return the 30-year-old sovereignty of Ukraine. He wants that back in the Russian Empire. And, and someone had said, hey, in the wake of the Soviet Union collapse, economic collapse of 1990, lots of countries broke away. Ukraine is Europe. So is Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, and Poland and Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. These all came over to the EU and or to NATO. And so for him to say our domain still, the Iron Curtain still exists and we still have a domain over those sovereign nations, this is an affront. This is an affront to human liberty, to human expression, to human prosperity. And yet the funny thing is, it doesn't need to be. That's the weird thing here, is that, come on, Ukraine is the bread basket to Russia and needs to have open, economic boundaries. They want to sell. Look, if you're raising sugar, you know what you really want to sell? Sugar. If you're drilling for oil in the ground, you know what you're desperate to sell? Oil, right? And if you're raising wheat, you know what you really want to sell, Ukraine? You want to sell wheat. Who's your biggest consumer? Who's the easiest, largest consumer of that? Oh, could it be Russia? Right. So it doesn't need to have this, we're on the brink of war and we don't need to be here, is what's bitterly ironic to me. And yet people have asked me over the last couple of weeks, hey, Doc, you think this is really going to happen? I'm saying, God, I hope not. Is it possible that this could be the tipping point for World War III? You bet your bottom side it is. But I hope it doesn't come to it, because it doesn't need to come to it. And yet, Archduke Ferdinand wasn't even known before he was assassinated. And boy, did that pile into World War I. The false pretense of the invasion of Poland started World War II, at least in the European theater and essentially for the rest of the world. It's often regarded as the beginning point of World War II. And so an invasion of Ukraine, could it be the start of World War III? You bet. And there's lots of reasons to be concerned here.
I see that. I see some real clear correlations, strangely, for those Russians that are currently silent but listening, between Nazi Germany moving into the Sudetenland and saying these are Germanic-speaking people, and we're just going to go in and annex them in, and Russians going into Ukraine and saying these are Slavic Russian people, and we're just embracing them in. I mean, to the point where at least when Germany went into the Sudetenland, they went in with tanks with big crosses painted on the side and a giant Germanic flag, singing German battle songs. With Ukraine, with Russia, they're actually doing a sort of a faux invasion of Russian separatists, what they called, even though there were clear lines of material and troops coming straight in out of Russia, but so that they could say this is just a local uprising of people who all of a sudden decided that they wanted to take a part of Ukraine and join the Russians. But it's the same excuse that kicked off World War II. Yes, is there always this strange chance that this could turn into World War III, something that we could never foresee, that Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets killed, that nobody knows who he is right now, but it sparks something off? All right, sure. It could be. But I think that the bigger it's us, anytime you go to war, it's a gamble, right? And I think that this time you've got Putin who's looking at himself. I don't know how old he is, 60 something, pushing 70 probably. And he's saying to himself, he's going, look, what is my legacy? He has been a great leader, and I don't mean great in terms of a good leader, but great in terms of a big, substantial leader for Russia. They couldn't have asked for anybody better. The guy they had before him, those two guys were jokes. You didn't have anybody good since Khrushchev, and Khrushchev was standing on the front lines of Stalingrad. He was a real man. I guess what I'm saying with Putin is this: what's his legacy going to be? He wants to see the USSR return. That's what he grew up under. They lost it because their economy collapsed, and he wants to see it returned, and he thinks that he can do it better. He's just like every other socialist, communist, Marxist out there. He thinks that he can do it better, and the system's great. It just hasn't had the right leader. So what better opportunity does he have now than any other time in his life to actually make it happen? Think about this. Who's the leader of the free world? The United States. What is Joe Biden going to do against Vladimir Putin?
Wait,
Nothing.
Joe Biden is the leader of the free world?
He is the leader of the free world. He doesn't know it, but I'm telling you.
Surrender. Can we just become the Vichy French now and surrender?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Because look, we're going to have an election here in a year. Which is going to probably, hopefully, change the House and Senate, and then right after that, we're going to have a presidential election. That could go on for another 8 years under a potentially conservative, strong, pro-U.S. military president. Putin doesn't have a chance to do anything after that point. There's a reason why he took Crimea under Obama and didn't do jack under Trump, and is now pushing through Ukraine under Biden. There's a clear reason why. If he's going to ever do it, this is his chance. And I feel he set everything up. All the chess places are in place. The ground is freezing in Ukraine. It's time to start rolling the tanks. His gamble is that the U.S. will do nothing. And I'm going to tell you, if the U.S. doesn't do anything, ain't none of the rest of Europe going to do jack either.
No, he'll get all of it back. Give that man a slice of Ukraine. There you go. He'll get it all back if we do nothing with Ukraine. And let's be clear about that. That's what Estonia and Lithuania and Poland and Hungary, they're all watching with great, anticipation.
Finland as well, Les. Finland, we're going to let you talk about Finland.
Yeah. No, all of these fell under the influence of Russia, but have never traditionally been Russia. Let's get that clear. I also will, it's just parting hairs, Bruce, but I don't think that Putin is a communist or a socialist. I don't think either of those. I think if anything, he's more of a royalist and sees himself as the new royal dynasty.
The new czar?
Yeah, why not? Why not? I have no problem with Russia having a czar and a Duma and, parliamentary sort of government that it had before the communists came and gutted everything. And remember that just last year, Putin showed in front of, he had a presence in front of the Duma where he scolded them and saying, no, I'm never bringing back communism. You had 70 years, you failed, right? He scolded them publicly, saying communism failed us and failed Russia. So I don't see him as a communist or even a socialist. And there's many attributes as a national leader that are enviable. Honestly, Bruce, Putin or Biden? Putin or Biden, right?
Listen. I got a guy on a Segway with a helmet on, and I got a guy bare-chested riding a bear. A 6-year-old can tell you which is the stronger of the two.
Man, that's a hard analogy to follow up.
I want these Russian troops massing on my border.
I'm not showing my wife that.
Brent, how'd you get Doc's secret sex robot collection?
So, hey guys, I'd like to get back to where Chad was talking, if we can kind of migrate that way. Let's perestroika. I don't even know what that means, but it's fun to say, especially when you're looking at a cutie with, my God, huge tracts of land. Her family owns huge tracts of land.
I see something like that, and I just say, da, da, da.
She's a robot. This is wholesome fun.
And she
all
wants
right.
to be American. Look, she's wearing OCP.
There you go. There you go. God bless immigration. Okay. Chad, think you're right. Let's play a game here. And the game is, whoops, the balloon goes up. Oh my God, we're all in trouble. So let's kind of focus on that, because I think you're right. I don't see the flat open lands of Ukraine as a paradise for guerrillas. I see the southwestern mountains as a paradise for guerrillas, but it definitely is. And the interesting thing is that's like the farthest way from their three sides, right? That's the fallback point. Kiev would be gone, unfortunately. But urban areas are also a strong point for guerrilla warfare, insurgency, and stuff like this. And urban dwellings make wonderful defenses. But I think it's this. Here's what I was very heartened to see. Not just the NATO resolve and the many other than Germany, the many, who are playing the Chamberlain. Some people have been talking about Chamberlain out here. And I really think it's that Germany's playing the Chamberlain appeasement role. Okay. Hoping for the best, and let's all put rose-colored glasses on and just say, why, Russia would never invade Ukraine thrice. It just wouldn't happen. So I think they're playing appeasement. The rest of us say, okay, if the balloon goes up, yeah, this is going to be very bad. And I think this is why it was a smart strategic move to just inundate Ukraine with small arms munitions. And of course, the most critical of those, and they should be across the spectrum. Where did Les come back? The most critical of those are anti-aircraft rockets and anti-armor rockets, like your, javelins and things like that. But it would also include anti-tank mines. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Very sexy. But mines and small arms and things like this, that is now where Les sits. He's on a horse riding shirtless. There he came back. I don't take this personal, Les, but damn, he's gone again. Anyway, so I think this is the right thing. What I'm trying to spit out here is to say, I think it's the right thing to do. I think that was a smart strategic move, is inundate that, because what those wide open spaces are good for are, surface to air missiles and anti-tank missiles. And damn you. Stop that.
Damn, I got to have another beer now after seeing that.
Come on, man. All right. I think that was a smart move. I think it will stiffen their resolve, and it will actually make this very, very costly for Russia. The more we're able to do that, I saw the UK was also sending in small arms and munitions. I think this is the way to do it. Look, guys, if you're going to retreat, at least fire all 16 of these Javelin before you go. So wait till you see tanks and APCs and then blow them out. You know, this sort of thing is how you, because we can produce far more rockets. And I don't mean 2 to 1 or 4 to 1 or 10 to 1. I mean 180 to 1. We can produce far more rockets quicker and cheaper than they can produce, you know, a T-80 tank. And so this is the way to go strategically. I think that that's going to be a great deterrence. But I think, honestly, just having the resolve to say, okay, we have 8,500 U.S. troops, you know, and NATO has all these standby troops to back existing, Eastern European nations such as Estonia, Poland, Hungary, and yes, the Ukraine. We're going to have to back this up. We're going to have to back this up and show that the Soviet Union, we're going to have to show the Russians that, hey, this isn't acceptable behavior. Come back to something rational. Come back to a negotiating table. Like I said, Ukraine has an economic and wants to have economic ties with Russia. Russia is providing the natural gas that heats the homes of, you know, Eastern and Central Europe. There's so much love to be had here, guys. Seriously, so much prosperity to be had. This is not necessary. World War III isn't. Let's all take a step back. And that's my message.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think any U.S. boots should be on the ground in Ukraine, but I think we should be arming them up. And that's not because I'm anti-Russian or anything like that. I've said a million times before, talking about Syria and stuff like that, we should be partnering with the Russians to, you know, in the fight in Syria against ISIS and everything else. And I think we should be partnering with the Russians to form a strong front against the Chi-Coms. So I am not anti-Russian whatsoever, but at the same time, it's like, man, the Ukrainians are on their own, man. They are their own country now. I saw somebody else post something about like, oh, how can you talk about Ukraine after you guys invaded Iraq? Well, there's two different freaking scenarios. I haven't heard Putin say that Ukraine has weapons of mass destruction yet. I mean, if they do, okay, I guess they're using the same argument. So,
but we have weapons of mass destruction. Is America going to invade? You know, I don't know, South Dakota. You know, it's just, that's ridiculous. That's a red herring. The fact is, Ukraine has been on many different times in history a sovereign nation, and it has been for 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia is not the Soviet Union. Back the hell off. You know what I'm saying? But I will say, to add to yours, Brent, and then I'll shut up again and let you have that, Les. Why is it that China gets preferential trade partner agreement with America, but Russia doesn't? You know what I'm saying? Like, the Russians are good people. So maybe that's something that, you know, Russia says, look, we fell asleep. We closed the Soviet Union. Everybody took a 20-year nap. We wake up and for the last 20 years, you've hemmed us in. Well, no kidding. Life went on while you were being a hermit, Russia. And I don't know that we need to apologize for that because, again, if this makes stronger nations and stronger alliances, that's a good thing. So I don't see why Russia sees this as a threat. But then again, I fail to see why America consistently misses opportunities to work with the Russians in Syria, to do joint training operations with the Russians, and to give them preferential treatment in trade agreement. Why? Why are we not doing this?
Yeah, that's probably a good reason right there.
That looks like a good reason to me.
Yeah. Well, as I started to say earlier, part of the Ukraine's problem is Ukraine brought this on themselves. And the fact that when they broke away from the Soviet Union, they didn't maintain their military. I mean, the Ukrainian defenses were very run down in 2014. They really didn't put up much of a fight. Yes, in the Crimea, the little green men showed up everywhere, but I find no cases of what was left of the Ukrainian fleet, and I'm using that term very loosely. It didn't leave dock to go out to fight the Russians. You know, the few Ukrainian MiGs that there were didn't take off and make some kind of strike or attack. No, from what you can see, the Ukrainians just went, Russians are here. You know, they didn't maintain, they didn't train, and now they're doing it under, you know, they've managed to hold the Russians to a certain point, And I think they've only managed to do that simply because Vlad doesn't want to pay the price he needs to pay to go further. Apparently, he's now willing to pony up. And so the Ukrainians kind of bear some of this themselves. I think the reason some nations are willing to help and some not, Germans are probably afraid the gas is going to get cut off if they help out. And the British, they're on an island off the coast of Europe, so they can send anti-tank weapons in by the C-17 load. And from some of the intel I saw today, at least 5 or 6 C-17s have landed, which some math I saw somebody do works out to be tens of thousands of their NLAW, which is kind of like a Javelin light for those that are not in the know. So for Britain, it's kind of a low cost for them. For the Germans, there's high risk, and they're going to take the conservative course. I've ambled on there, but gave us a lot more to talk about.
Well, we know why the Russians are emboldened. Afghanistan.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Thank you. 100%. That's why the Russians are emboldened.
Absolutely. No question about that. When you betray your allies, you are perceived as weak. And we've done it too many times. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We've betrayed these people. We went in to help Beirut. We left. We went in to help Somalia. We left. And in all cases, we left with our legs between, our tail between our legs. And we are perceived as weak, and there are repercussions of that. And certainly Ukraine is suffering from that. But I do agree, Les, that that Ukraine does bear some of the culpability here. What do you guys think about this possibility? The Donbass regions have a very high percentage of Russian-speaking people who identify themselves as Russian. Crimea has traditionally been a Russian territory. What do you think, as one of the peace settlements, as one of the negotiating chips, is to say, okay, you know what? Ukraine nation is sovereign, but we will return the Donbass and Crimea area by default, they're occupied by Russia right now. Anyway, let's end this fighting and say, okay, Ukraine, not only are you a sovereign nation and have the right to join NATO, but you can't turn around. You need to give that back to the Russians. You shouldn't have taken it in the first place. Back in 1990s, you shouldn't have taken it. It is Russians. Give it back. What do you guys think about that? Is that just wrong-headed of me?
I don't think so. I think that's probably the strategy, at least the minimal strategy, the minimal goals that they have. If they do invade, this could end up being a long, bloody war. They may be fine with just having those areas. I know Donbass is an area that's popular for Russia, but also the southern provinces as well. There's a lot of Russian protests going on there. So they may just want that minimal amount for, minimal cost. So I think you're spot on. I think that might be a strategic goal already.
Chad, I think what you're missing is NATO. Russia does not want Ukraine becoming part of NATO, period. Not with concessions, not any way, anyhow, anytime. Here's the thing. Why is Ukraine not already part of NATO? Why didn't NATO already bring it in? Some technicality, some little rule that they didn't for some reason meet, some little quota that they didn't, some little line that they didn't sign their name on. Why didn't we not make Ukraine part of NATO 10 years ago? If we wanted them to be part of NATO, they would be part of NATO. We don't want them to be part of NATO because Russia said no. And it's that simple. I don't think that, I think certainly if we got Ukraine to say, hey, Russia, you can have Crimea and you can have everything east of Donbass, we won't have a problem with that. We'll sign off on that. They'll say thanks, and they'll move their tanks right up to those lines from where they are right now, and they'll just be sitting there on idle. They're not going to accept Ukraine being part of NATO, period, and NATO's not going to accept Ukraine being part of NATO, period, because if they would have already done it.
No, I think you're spot on there, Bruce. I think both sides like the idea of Ukraine being a buffer. It's just seems like Russia wants to have that buffer be smaller than it used to be.
I don't know. That doesn't sit well with me. I think sovereign nations can enter the pacts and the treaties that they want to, and it bothers me that, you know, I want to be sensitive to this notion of sphere of influence. You know, America has enjoyed for 200 years a sphere of influence of North America. We've kept other nations out for the most part of Central America and the Caribbean as our sphere of influence. So I want to be somewhat sensitive to that. At the same time, maybe that's a dinosaur. Maybe that's archaic way of thinking. The reality is Ukraine is Ukraine. My question here is the Donbass, are the eastern regions that are predominantly, I'm told, are predominantly Russian ethnic, and Crimea, were they ever part of Ukraine? Should they have ever been part of Ukraine? But I hear what you're saying. I'm not denying that, Bruce. What I'm saying is, no. Whatever Ukraine is, and that's a hard definition, but whatever Ukraine is, Russia doesn't have any say-so in their day-to-day. And if they want to say, no, you can't be part of NATO, then Ukraine can say, fine, I'll sell all of my bread to Europe. How do you feel about that, Russia? And Russia says, well, then I'll invade you. Nope. Bread's just a commodity, Russia. You know, we don't invade people for sugar, and we don't invade for people for gas and fuel and oil and all the things that people claim we invade people. No, we don't. We don't invade for commodities, and neither should Russia. They need to come and negotiate just as everybody else negotiates for the price, and not say, oh, Walmart, I don't like the price of, you know, the pool floaty toys, so that's it. I'm invading Walmart. No, you negotiate for a better price.
I think Russia would invade over a commodity drop of a dime.
Well, world opinion does hold some weight, and I think they're being pretty smart about this. Honestly, they did invade Korea not Korea, but Crimea in 2014, and they stopped and they waited, and now we're having more problems. I think it's more of a Fabian strategy where they're kind of inching in a little by little, and before you know it, Ukraine will be engulfed. Bruce, you and I really don't disagree on this at all. What I was saying was, I think the minimal strategic goals that they would be satisfied with, at least temporarily, would be to annex part of Ukraine and then wait some more, and hey, we'll infiltrate more areas, and then hey, we got these new areas that are, you know, pro-Russian now, let's invade those. So I think this is kind of a Fabian thing right now.
Yeah, I think the line in the sand, I think the real disagreement here, because I agree with you, Chad, that's absolutely, Russia would absolutely go for that. The line in the sand is Russia is once a portion of what is now Ukraine, whether it's 2 square miles, joins NATO. That's extremely problematic for Russia, because that does mean that territory is now off limits to Russian incursion, because you now have not just the United States guaranteeing the security of that area, but all of NATO, all of Western Europe. That's something Russia doesn't want to see happen. That would be a defeat for Russia, because right now that hasn't happened. And right now, all of Ukraine is on the table. But the second that 2 square miles of Ukraine join NATO, well, those 2 square miles are no longer available to Russia in any capacity, whether it's military invasion or anything else. I think that that's what Russia wants to avoid. And the easiest way to avoid that is to right now just freaking take it and say, what you going to do? Sure, we'll put economic sanctions on them. I get that. Well, everybody will be mad, and we'll write really mean stories about Vladimir Putin and Yahoo. But 40 years from now, they'll still have Ukraine, and they'll be getting all of those commodities they've wanted, and there'll be a better national pride. That's my take on it.
All right. And if that's the case, look, let's be honest with ourselves and say that, you know, you commonly hear, oh, it's a slippery slope. Well, the slippery slope argument is a logical fallacy. But let's say it's a, you know, the Fabian strategy. If that is true, damn, you stop doing that when I'm talking, because I stopped thinking clearly. All right. I hate you. Yes. I mean, no.
Brent, can you scroll down a little bit? I'm admiring the type 3.
Yeah. Scroll, please. By all means. What was I saying? I can't remember. Give it about 20 seconds. Scrolling.
Fabian attack. Oh, look at that.
Whoa. Hey, milled receiver. Look at that. Huh?
Look at that
Wait,
trigger control.
what are you doing? Go back to the milled. Thank you.
That's a spiker too.
Yeah, I know. That's good stuff.
It's not even a Russian gun.
I don't even remember what we're talking about, you bastards. All right, what was I saying? Fabian strategy. Here's my problem with that. Here's my problem with the Fabian strategy is that if that's true, if that is in fact the case, and I'm not denying that it might be, if that's the case, then let's just stop talking about Ukraine, because you know damn good and well this is not about Ukraine. This is about Estonia. This is about Lithuania. This is about Hungary. This is about Poland. They will all fall in succession, not because of a domino theory, but because Russia will use the exact same argument. They used to be mine. They're mine today. I take them back, and you all shrink from my awesomeness. If that's the case, guys, let's just get into it. Let's do it.
What we need is Germany to step up.
World
and
War. No.
I
mean, let's do it. And yeah, I'm 2.5 beers into this, but I'm serious. I don't want my grandkids suffering this, guys. If it's time to do it, if that's what it is, I don't hate Russia and I don't hate the Russian people, but let's just do it. Let's own up to what's inevitable that we're gonna do anyway. Let's fight it out right now. Let's do World War III. I don't want it. I'm not going to live through it. But you know what? Maybe my grandkids will have a better life. And the kids in Eastern Europe and the kids in Russia will eventually have a better life because they'll see what their grandparents did and said, "You fucking retards."
Well, a lot of those countries you mentioned are already part of NATO, so that's probably why we haven't seen anything like that happen in countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, all that stuff.
Doesn't matter.
They are part, but they did. The Russian did. They did do that in Georgia. They attacked Georgia. Georgia, resorted to terrorism, and their NATO application was pulled. They were shunned by NATO, and I think that's what we're seeing here as well. Is hey, let's provoke a fight with Ukraine, let them mess up, and NATO's going to be like, we wash our hands of you.
Well, and the only thing I disagree with you there, Chad, on is that the reason that NATO shunned Georgia or would shun Ukraine is based over terroristic activities. Yes, I understand that that's what they wrote in bold letters on the application, but the reality is if we accepted them into NATO, we would have to defend them. If we can somehow say that they're not part of NATO, we can wash our hands of it and walk away. What would you expect an occupied country to do? Let's just pretend for a minute. Red Dawn, 1984, the Russians invaded the U.S. NATO would probably say the same thing about us rather than coming to our aid, that the Americans have resorted to terrorism when fighting the Russians, and therefore we're not going to defend them as part of NATO. It's just a cop-out, man. It's not even real. And it makes all of NATO a joke.
Well, you get no argument from me. I'm not sure NATO isn't a joke. So, I mean, it really hasn't accomplished much, in its history.
Well,
so,
I mean, good point, Chad. Look at NATO. I mean, there's an obligation for all these to spend 2% of their GDP on their defense. Now, Trump nudged them that way, but I find it interesting that the countries that were doing that were the United States, Great Britain, Greece, because it had to do it as part of its loan payments to the Germans who required them to buy all German weapons. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. And Estonia and I think Lithuania. There were only 5 countries. And I find it interesting, 2 of the countries that were doing it were right on the Russian doorstep. NATO doesn't do its part, never really ever has, and I don't it's just the way it is. That's part of being NATO. Look at what our neighbor north. If there's a neighbor that's not abiding by its commitments, there's that country. I mean, they're barely modernized. One of the problems we had during the Kosovo War and the Bosnian conflict was complaints from U.S. generals who were saying, we have two NATOs. We have one that can only do things during the day with its antiquated equipment, and then we have the one that can be ultra modern that is basically the U.S. military.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten to the point, and it was a big worry in the early 2000s, Doc. I'm sure you probably remember this, all kinds of journals talking about how NATO was losing interoperability because the U.S. was advancing so quick and the rest of NATO wouldn't upgrade.
Absolutely. I mean, Bosnia and Kosovo and Macedonia were just huge black eyes to NATO. They had not just a war, but a genocide operation going on in their own backyard, and they couldn't solve it for 4 long years until Americans rolled in, not with blue helmets and white tanks, but camouflages and ready to, their general orders were anybody who is shooting, kill them. And after 4 long years of one atrocity against humanity after another, the Americans alone rolled in to, into the Balkans and said, I'll kill anybody who shoots. I'll kill you all. War over. Americans did not have any pitched battles. Not a single thing. Our biggest, our biggest losses were clearing mines because not a damn soul would shoot at Americans when they said, no, we're ready. Let's rumble. Let's do it. I'll kill you all. Nope, we don't want any part of this 4-year-old war. All right. NATO doesn't, at least, you know what? UN is a joke and UN is corrupt, but at least the UN has Korea to say, hey, we did one thing right. One thing. And they've lived on that, on that fame for 70 years, but they got one thing right. Where's NATO gotten it right? So I can be very highly critical of NATO. I want NATO to work. I love NATO, but they're a retard, right? They're a retarded child that we all love. Because they're incapable. They're incompetent. So I'm not even sure, we should say this out loud because I don't want Russia to figure out, hey, it doesn't matter if Ukraine is part of NATO. She is not incompetent, but NATO is. I mean, come on. The leaders of NATO outside of the U.S., the leaders of NATO have been the British. Absolutely, hands down, the competent core of NATO has been the UK. And what did the UK do right before Ukraine? We don't need tanks anymore. They're obsolete. Jesus, mother of God. Talk about short-sighted. I don't know how they go pee in the UK. They clearly can't see the toilet in front of them. So I'm just so short-sighted. And if that's their leader, that tells you a whole lot. And I, God, I love these people. I truly do. We are them, right? So we come from them. You have to love them. They're your family. But I'll tell you what, that doesn't mean that we get everything right. We get so much wrong. I don't know. I don't trust NATO to do the right thing. And Germany has been exhibiting over these last couple of few weeks that they will not do the right thing. And unfortunately, this sends all the wrong messages to Putin, doesn't it?
Well, Brent, I hope you title the second part of this live stream, "The Hate on NATO Circle Jerk," because we're all willing participants.
Well, I think, Bruce, what you said earlier, man, I think this is what this is all about, right? The Georgia situation you cited was 100% side on. As long as there's threat of war in Ukraine, NATO will not bring Ukraine into the fold. There's no way, because of what you said. If one of these NATO countries gets engulfed in war, it's all in, right? That's how all the NATO was in Afghanistan. There's the whole premise of it. So as long as there's threat of war in Ukraine, they will not absorb that. So I can't blame the Russians in that sense, right? The whole Cuban Missile Crisis. We didn't want the Soviets to have a missile in our backyard, right? They don't want freaking a NATO country on their borders, right? Or more to the so than there already is. So you if you look at it from their perspective, you can't blame them.
No, there's advantages to Russia to doing this. One, bringing up that, yeah, we're not going to bring, there's one advantage right there.
That's a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. Another one they get, though, is if they threaten to invade. Of course, you're right. We brought up the thing that we're not going to bring somebody's about to be invaded into the fold. And two, as we've mentioned earlier, Ukraine is the breadbasket of Russia. They get the thing and don't have to pay the duties and taxes on it anymore. There's not much for them to lose here. Their big loss would be loss of face, as if the Russian army suffered a defeat like they did against the Finns in 1939 or Chechnya in 1996.
Chechnya, 94, 96. That's what I was thinking. Chechnya. You know, we all talk about how the Russians went in and they were, you know, that's why I said sending those missiles are very, very important, because that was the undoing. I mean, there was multiple contributing factors, but that was the undoing of the Russians in 94 to 96. They lost Chechnya. Then Chechnya turned to terrorism. Everybody hated Chechnya, and Russia went and did its, you know, raised earth. It just, you know, let's kill every blade of grass from here south, you know.
That was the Grozny rebuilding program I think you're talking about there, Doc.
Yes, it was rezoning. Yeah. So, Chad, I can't believe you're just letting me babble. I needed you to keep me in check here and say,
Chad, you've got notes. We know you have flashcards.
I do actually. I will say that I think I want to try to turn the tides here a little bit with what little time we got left, but I do think, in my honest opinion, that it's going to be Ukrainian nationalism that saves the day. It's not going to be NATO. And I think that you know, like I mentioned earlier, Ukrainians have their own history, culture, language, etc. The nationalistic levels are an indicator of the people's will to resist, and that's really what's going to determine what comes. It's not going to be us. It's not going to be NATO. It's not going to be any of these other Eastern European countries outside of whatever logistical support that they provide. It's going to be how willing the Ukrainians are to fight and fight on. That's the bottom line. I want to turn this a little bit, if I can, just with whatever time we got left. I made a comment earlier about you know, something that we could get out of this for us, and that is the second Cold War with Russia. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Awesome idea. I think that is a great picture, but our grenade launchers are way better than theirs. But the operators got some skill, clearly. No, a second Cold War has an advantage, too, because it allows America to restore itself as the arsenal of democracy. You know, Ukrainians heavily arming themselves with American weaponry, even to the point that they literally change calibers to 5.56 because we make it so goddamn plentiful, you know, and javelins become as popular as RPG-7s. You know, that will go a long way to horribly quote Lyndon Johnson. Maybe Ukrainian boys need to do Ukrainian fighting or something to that effect. You know, just supply them everything they need and let the Russians know that supply line will not be turned off. You know, maybe we start pulling all those F-16s out of the desert and stuff and give them to the Ukrainians, because I still think we make better fighter planes, and a 1980s, 1990s era F-16A is probably more than a match for just about anything in the Russian Air Force, especially when we can supply them in bulk.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And also start heavily rearming countries. You know, they have manpower. Poland, Bulgaria, Romania has manpower. It doesn't have much more than that. The Bulgarian Air Force is 8 MiG-21s. You know, we need to lavish American planes on it. You know, F-15s. I mean, hell, the Air Force just put the F-15 back in production, so give them the old ones. You know, build those NATO forces up, and just that should be our strategy.
Man, what a neat idea, Chad, of a future Cold War 2.0, right? I agree totally with Pegasus test here. I mean, I think we should arm. I don't think we should put boots on the ground. But man, the devastation that something like a javelin brings, where one javelin can take out the best tanks that they've got. And here's the thing about Russia. Russia doesn't have a great economy. They're one country whose inflation is worse than ours right now. That's working against them. Their economy is only about the size of the state of Texas. I've said this before. They have tons of troops and they have a lot of tanks, but when you start taking those tanks out and you start taking those tanks out relatively cheaply, for the Ukrainians, it'd be free because we're not charging them for the javelins we're sending, and other weapon systems similar to that, denying them any type of air dominance as well. I tell you what I've seen from the Ukrainian military is that it is a professional military. It is different from arming the Muhad Adid from the 1970s to fight the Russians, where you necessarily worried about what's going to happen with those weapons 10 years from now. Ukrainian military is a professional military, and as long as they can maintain that modern level of professionalism that I think they've really developed over the last 10 years, I think that we could feel much more comfortable arming them with those weapon systems and letting them just go to work. It literally takes one guy to take out a T-72 or T-90, and I'm sure that's a crew of at least 4 men, maybe 5, and an entire tank with a relatively inexpensive javelin or something of the equivalent. And there's a lot more we can do behind the scenes in addition to that. A lot of stuff we can do on the electronic side in terms of jamming radar, electronics, causing bugs in their computers and all these things. They're using computer systems just like we are, although they're probably not quite advanced, and that's something that we can use against them. And I'll say, there was one other comment here. I'll say lastly, they were talking about, arming the Ukrainians to take out Soviet air power. Up until this point, I haven't seen Soviet air power used a lot. Almost all of what they're using to gain their ground are twofold: tanks and APCs with troops, pretty conventional stuff, and artillery. Artillery is still boss. You haven't seen a lot in terms of aircraft. The great thing about using tanks and artillery is it minimizes your chances of having captured individuals such as pilots and planes knocked down behind the lines. So if they hold to that, don't know if they will. If they hold to that, though, I think that the technique of arming them with anti-tank weapons would serve us very well. And Chad, I'm with you, man. I mean, trust me, man, the 80s, no doubt, were a simpler time. Living through the Cold War, I grew up under it. We knew who our enemies were, and we all stood together as Americans. And even though we had our differences, there was always a big, mean kid across the pond that was our true enemy, and we're all ready to band together and fight against him when we needed to. We don't have that now. Maybe that's part of the problem that we've got, Doc.
Yeah, let me jump in there and say, Chad and Bruce, I liked the Cold War, not because I liked the Cold War. I lived through it. You guys lived through it. I hated it. But one of the aspects I loved about it was the unity of cause, right? Think of lines of effort. And we had a strategic unity of cause and a strategic identity groups that I absolutely adore that time. There's some romantic aspects about it. Do I want to recapture that? You're damn straight I do. I absolutely do. Do I think going back in time and saying, Russia bad? No, that's too simplistic. Here's what I'm going to say. What if we say this? I'm all about being anti-Marxist. I swore in 1985 to be an anti-Marxist, and I am to this very day. All forms of Marxism, right? Whether it comes as eco-terrorism or feminism or socialism or communism, all forms of I can get on board with that. But here's the problem. The Russians aren't. And many of the isms that we, or many of the nations that we used to identify, now they're allies. I want to work with the Russians. I want to work against Marxists and say, hey, if you're one of those woke progressive bastards, you can't come with us to mine the, Saturn. The moons around Saturn, you can't, you're not part of our, our base in Mars. What I'm saying is, look, guys, We got to get off this planet. Let's start putting our resources to another form of warriorhood. And that is going to look a whole lot more like sci-fi. We need to get off this planet. We need to get to Titan. We need to get to Mars. We need to get to Venus. We need to get to some of those rings of, we need to start something, and I haven't even seen the series yet. Can't wait to start it, The Expanse. We need to get to something like that. Because us fighting against each other, it's pointless. Now, here's where I am on board with this, is if somebody's bullying somebody else, and that's what Marxists do, that they're absolutely against, fundamentally against individual human rights. They're fundamentally against it, right? So I'm all about being anti-Marxist, but making enemies where they don't exist, yeah, it isn't just an ethical, oh, that doesn't give me a warm fuzzy. It's, well, hold on. If we start working with the Russians, with the Ukrainians, with the Estonians, India, and all of these, in Canada and Australia and all of these wonderful things, if we start working with them, we can get off this damn rock and start doing what we know we need to do as a human species, and that is populating the heavens. We need to find a new enemy, and we need to find a new cause that unites us, but also to hell with the Marxists.
China.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say to that is the space race was part of the Cold War, and I think the competition between the two powers, I'm not for any type of hot war right now. I don't think we're ready for that right now. Our country's in shambles. Our military's, after Afghanistan, probably the morale's a little low. But I think the competition between Russia and the United States is a good thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to teeter on nuclear war. But we need that external threat, that external. The Cold War, we put a man on the moon. That was a direct cause of it. So yeah, exactly. But I think we need some competition, and I think Russia would be a good competitor. That being said, Brent, China would, if we get in a nuclear Cold War with China, I've got zero problems with that, because like Doc said, they are Marxist, and I think we're already there. It's just for some reason not uniting this country because we don't see it as a danger. I'm sure there are people on the left who see them as friends, because they are fellow Marxists, fellow travelers. But I think some competition. I can agree with you on that. That making enemies is not probably productive with Russia, but at the same time, I think some good solid competition with Russia would be a good thing.
Yeah, I think China's number one, guys. That's my opinion, and I think we're already in a Cold War with them, 100%. So we're at the 2 hour mark, guys. I want to go ahead and wrap this up. We got some save rounds. Sounds like Les, you got one.
No, I was agreeing. China is the bigger threat than Russia. If the two were to throw down against us individually, like just U.S. v. Russia or U.S. v. China, China's got way more combat power in so many areas. Russia could honestly be defeated, and its only real weapon would be its size. So China is the bigger threat. I think there is common ground to eventually have some kind of more kind of a frenemies relationship with Russia. Ever think you'll have a Russia in NATO kind of thing? But I see we can reach the point where we can live with each other pretty productively and pretty peacefully. Chinese, not so much.
Russia in NATO. That's an interesting thought.
All right, guys. Well, let's wrap this up. So we're going to say farewell. We're going to end it tonight. And everybody, goodbye. And we'll see you on the next one.